Long ago, in a small town in Italy, lived a wealthy young man named Francis Bernardone. Handsome as a prince, with friends possessed, his prospects appeared boundless. But one day he would turn his back on the world he loved, for a life so extreme that his friends and family deemed him a madman. The world would make him a saint, but sainthood was the last thing he ever wanted. The 13th century Italy was a dark age lit by the fires of war. Emperors fought against popes, cities against cities, nobles against merchants. Life was short. Disease and death lurked everywhere. But in the little town of Assisi, for the privileged few, the pursuit of pleasure eclipsed other concerns. Oblivious at the moment to the plight of those less fortunate than he, Francis Bernardone celebrated his 20th birthday.
Francis was a roustabout, vivid, colorful, life-affirming, joyous man who loved to sing, who loved jokes. A man who really loved to have a good time.
I think that Francis was a kind of playboy in his teenage years. He was certainly also a leader. And as a leader, he was always the one who was out for fun.
They called him the king of the revels. He would carouse through the streets with his friends. He would have been at the parties, which would have been anything but puritanical.
His mother hoped he would settle down and marry well. It was assumed he would inherit the family business, and that, like his father, he would one day become a luxury cloth merchant, a profession guaranteed to bring the family lots of money.
For the very first time in history, money was not merely a medium of exchange. It was an end and a goal in itself. Money was the means to power.
Francis's father was an extremely powerful figure. What we would today call a self-made man, one of the nouveau riche.
Pietro Bernardone had this desire, as most merchants did in the period, to have more and more and more. He wanted big things, and he had great plans for Francis.
Those plans were cut short. In 1202, civil war broke out with the neighboring town of Perugia. Like most wealthy young men of his day, Francis was eager to defend his beloved Assisi. Attacking ferociously, the advancing Perugian army slaughtered their neighbors. One of the first to take up arms, Francis was also one of the first captured and held for ransom. Plunged into the darkness of a damp, infested dungeon, Francis caught a severe case of malaria.
He was very ill, and that was a sobering experience. It would turn him inward and enable him to start reflecting on his life. All the meaning went out of that. There was an emptiness about it.
He had tried the life of the playboy. He had tried the family business. He had tried the glory of war. Everywhere he turned, there was nothing but disappointment.
I was very frail. I began to regard myself as worthless.
Racked with fever, he watched the weeks turn into months. Finally, after a year wasting away in near perpetual darkness, his ransom was paid. Francis was released.
He was primed for something heroic. But what that was, he as yet hadn't the remotest idea.
The year after he had been in prison, he seemed kind of aimless. He seemed to have lost a focus for his life.
Bruised and bloodied by war and disease, he was beaten down to the point at which he said to himself, there's got to be something more to life than this.
And I think that kind of experience prepared him to be receptive to God's action in his life.
Francis happened to duck into the cool of a small, half-ruined church called San Damiano.
I gazed up at a crucifix. It seemed to say to me, Francis, don't you see that my house is being destroyed? Go then and rebuild it for me.
He's in this church, and God says to him, Francis, repair my house. Can't you see it's falling into ruin? And what does he do? He looks around and he says, oh man, this church is a mess.
Now, he was very literal. He doesn't at this point see the larger meaning of that repair my house.
Most high, glorious God, enlighten the darkness of my heart and give me true faith, that I may carry out your holy and true command.
And the Francis who leaves that little chapel is very different from the man who arrives. He had to do something with his life. He had to do something.
This incident at San Damiano is a real turning point for Francis. It's not so much magical as it is life-changing.
Francis would spend quite a bit of time now just going to lonely caves, to rundown churches, praying, trying to hear this voice again.
But